Welcome to episode 171 of the Daniel Yours podcast with today's guest, Lauren Tomlin. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. We are joined by Lauren today, and this feels like another one of those episodes that is so overdue. And I think it's something to like the internet messes us up in many, many ways, but some of it is like we have this interaction constantly seeing your name pop up and here and there and everything. And it's like, I feel like I'm talking to you kind of all the time, but we've never actually had a conversation. And so now we're finally doing it. So Lauren, thanks for being here today.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
How do you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what it is that you do?
So I'm Lauren, obviously, but I am a health and transformation coach, and I mainly work with women, and we work on personal development, identity, reinvention, excuse me, and focus on health, habits, nutrition, fitness, mindset, as well as embodiment and becoming connected to our intuition and allowing that to guide us through life.
Lots there that we're going to unpack. And the place that I want to start is with your own story through all of this. I think there's a movement now, and you're certainly part of it and leading the way in some ways in this, where people are starting to finally blend like the whole holistic aspect and, maybe woo-woo stuff, as I will personally call it, and all that stuff with like the hardcore, like, hey, no, like, you got to train, here's your macros, like here's like all the science shit, but then here's all like the other stuff that's like equally as important and also works. So how did you arrive at all of this on your own in your own story to kind of blend this together and now begin to give it back?
I love this question, and it is definitely directed to my personal experience. Like most of everybody else, I stumbled into my own fitness journey through lots of trial and error. I was not happy with the state of my body and the state of my health, and I tried all of the things. I tried keto, beach body workouts. What else? I've tried like a version of Atkins that was influenced by my mom because I grew up with her in diet culture as well. And intermittent fasting, just all the things, and was never able to stick with them long enough to gain any type of consistency, which then just created more frustration. And of course, I grew up on YouTube. So I would watch all the YouTube vloggers, and that's what introduced me first to bodybuilding workouts, macronutrients. And I, in 2016, hired a macro coach, which introduced me to the world of macronutrients as well as powerlifting. We actually did like a powerlifting / bodybuilding style training and fell in love with the gym and what I could accomplish there in terms of gaining strength, which then gave me confidence. But along the way, I had like my separate life outside of health, and I went through some very trying times. So became a mother. A year later, got separated, navigated divorce, and that was kind of the initiation into my healing journey, where I felt very pulled to look inwards. It led me down the yoga and meditation path, and I had taken a step back on some of the more like Western philosophies, right? Like the bodybuilding and all of this. So I was able to experience more Eastern practices, and that's what kind of got me tapped into my body and how it was truly feeling and starting to honor emotions, as well as the mindset to know how to be emotionally intelligent, label the emotions, and almost start this inner conversation with myself. But obviously being in the West and still being friends with people who were very much in the gym and nutrition sphere, I just started to realize that there's like this beautiful blend of both. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. It's like we lean one way or the other, but I think that there's this beautiful relationship with both honoring the body and regulating nervous system, paying attention to the way our body may respond to certain things, as well as mastering the mind and doing the physical actions that actually also produce results. And I think they all just kind of coexist. And if we're able to get a good grasp on all of it, it just creates inner harmony within ourselves. So we're able to experience the best of all worlds.
Where were you then in your actual physical transformation, like with your body, with your fitness, when you started to begin all of the Eastern kind of stuff?
Eastern. Okay. So I'm trying to think we may get into this on this podcast, but my life has very many chapters and it gets very confusing for some people because they're like, how are you 34 years old and you've experienced all of this? But so in 2016, when I first started doing more bodybuilding, powerlifting, nutrition, I'm 5'6" for reference, but I was around like 175 pounds. So on the heavier side of where I've been in life, not comfortable. And then I spent about 2.5 or 3 years in that world. Sorry, I have like this little ick that I've been kicking off.
No worries.
So yeah, spent from 2016 to 2019 in that world. Then in 2020, that's when COVID happened. That's when my son hit a year. And that's when I also transitioned through separation and divorce. And that's when I kind of got into the Eastern. At that point, I was happy with my body, especially I had gotten to this place where I had given myself a lot of grace because I had just experienced motherhood and postpartum. So my body wasn't as physically fit as it was previous to pregnancy, but I loved my body at that point. I felt like I had a somewhat good relationship with my body, and I was in this place where, again, I just knew that I needed to prioritize the inner work and working on my heart, working on the way that I viewed the world and myself. But at that point, I think I was around 160 pounds, and had a lot more muscle at that point than I did, previous 3 to 4 years prior. But yeah, I was in a place of peace while also wanting to continue to push my body and just see what it, was capable of. But at that point, it was more so of just honoring all of the, I don't know what the word would be. There was a lot of myself, honestly. There was a lot of me that was asking for some attention that I had been suppressing for a really long time. And that's what became the priority.
I see. So the reason why I asked that question was because I'm trying to kind of get to the conclusion, or I don't know the word either, but trying to get to the point where some people will hear some of these kind of, the grounding, the inner work, the meditation, the yoga and all that stuff and think, oh, that's where I need to start. And some people will say, well, hey, I just need to go to the gym, like forget meditation, forget my inner peace, like all that will come later. And like, I need to do one or the other. And sometimes these can kind of be concurrent. Sometimes people will start on one end and then come to the other, or the other end and then kind of come to the middle and realize both. And so the reason I asked that, very directly was just to kind of get at that. And for you and what you think, or how you think some other people should kind of go about this journey. Someone who's like, hey, I'm not, I love myself, but I want more for my body, which is a concept we're going to come back to, and we'll probably repeat that like 50,000 times in this podcast, because I think that's huge. But it's like, hey, I want a little bit more. I want to, lose a little bit of weight, build a little bit of muscle, change my body, whatever. But I also love myself. Like, where do you suggest that people start on this journey if that's where their head's at?
I love that you asked this question and that you kind of guided the conversation this way, because I see everything as energy. Like when we tap in and we start looking into quantum physics and everything, you start to realize that really what we're experiencing out here all boils down to energy. And that you take that concept and then you go a little bit deeper, and there's polarities. There's this duality. That's what creates this experience, right? Like we can't have light without dark. It's where like the yin yang and everything comes into play. But through my experience, as well as studying the teachings and integrating them, putting them into practice with myself and clients, it's almost physically impossible for us to even feel safe enough in our bodies to open up the emotions and start to navigate that inner world when our physiological needs are not being met. So I think this is where things start to get a little convoluted, or we kind of miss the point. Is we think like that this spiritual wellness, woo-woo, whatever you want to call it, is the thing that's missing. And yes, it is, but it cannot even exist if we are not taking care of the physical actions in the physical body. And that's why these things have to kind of coexist. But I believe where everybody should start is with those physiological needs. So sleeping, right? Sleeping enough and prioritizing sleep quality, nourishing our bodies, moving our bodies, being active, those things then allow us to feel safe enough within to start exploring that inner realm. And I don't think that anybody is going to be able to navigate that work, which I would argue is the more difficult work, without having that structure in place. And I bring up this energy because when you hear people talk about, and myself included, like feminine and masculine energy, that starts to sound very woo-woo. But really what it is the masculine is the physical and it's the logical, whereas the feminine is more of the nurturing and the emotions. So of course, if our emotions don't have a safe physical vessel to reside in, we're not really able to properly navigate them and to nurture them and to give them the space that they need.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think that really clears things up for people who get confused and get bogged down and go too far down one rabbit hole of either side. Like it is in the world of the way communication exists today and social media and all these things, it's very hard to kind of like hold two opposite but complementary ideas in your head at the same time, where it's like, hey, you can like, do grounding and meditation and, whatever, all those other stuff. But like, you also just got to like work out. Like you're not gonna, track the moon cycles your way to having a six pack. Like it's not, that's not going to happen. Right. But you're also not going to like, run enough to make yourself like transform and, do your inner work and like heal whatever is going on inside your body. Right.
Yeah.
So there has to be both. This concept of masculine and feminine energy, I think, is something that has come up a lot more. So where do you see people kind of faulting with this? And maybe like speak on the feminine side more. Are people kind of leaning too much into the feminine, or women more so leaning too much into the masculine? Or where do you see some of like the not anyone's fault, but mistakes that people are making with this?
It's a loaded question. So my personal views, and I'm, again, just speaking, so I'm not meaning to offend anybody in any type of way. This is just kind of what I've observed throughout my own journey, and I've been doing this for quite a while, is we can unconsciously be influenced sometimes. And I honestly think that is part of it. So when I see something where I'm like, oh, I think that maybe the feminine or the masculine is kind of being misrepresented, I almost have this piece of knowing that's part of the process, because even myself, I have been caught up in that as well at some point. I almost think that it's like just the life experience and the continuation of the practice and observance, and then like journaling or just, again, inner work that then leads you to these conclusions as we grow. But for the feminine side in particular, I think that feminine energy is extremely misunderstood. I think that we can fall under this belief that feminine energy is just sitting back and not doing any type of work. It is potentially exploiting or using our physical bodies as a way to attract or manipulate, which I think is extremely sad. And again, speaking from personal experience, because I've definitely been there. And where the reality is feminine is all of it. When we think about the creation, which again cannot exist without the masculine, but when this is so funny that we're bringing this up, because I just got into a conversation where we were talking about sperm motility. Okay, so when you think about sperm and an egg, like we're just thinking about like the actual beginning of creation, right? There's one egg. And there's like 30 to 40 million sperm. And the sperm is needed, right, to actually fertilize the egg and to create these things. So that's why I think like modern day feminism, which is kind of under this guise of this entitlement and like almost talking men down and toxic masculinity. And it's like, no, men are equally as amazing as women are. And we're amazing in these different ways. It's not all about like proving this equality. We're equal in these different ways, and both are amazing. But the sperm has its job to do, and then the egg has its job. But then when we think about that creation, like the woman is who is growing the baby and is bringing it into this world. So that in that concept, the feminine is more so related to, if you would want to call it, the spiritual realm or the emotions, all of these things. So we have to almost think and accept feminine energy as all of that. Pretty much anything that has to do with what is not seen on earth. Whereas the masculine is what grounds all of that, and they work together. You can't have one without the other. So I say, like, the feminine is the eyes, the masculine is the one who grounds. So they're both equally vital. But in terms of how, feminine energy has kind of been skewed, or I almost believe it's been hijacked in a way that keeps women from their power instead of stepping into it. Like, even the sense of women empowerment, we don't need empowerment. No one needs to give us power. We just need to realize that we have that power within us and step into it instead of like waiting for a handout of our birthright. And I believe that the same notion applies to men as well, because they're being, told that their masculinity is toxic instead of honoring all of the beautiful traits of masculinity and how those things are needed. Like, to be able to stand our ground, to be able to protect and to provide and to keep our families safe. Those are all traits that we need to honor and accept in the man, instead of saying like, oh, this is toxic and you should be, should not be exuding these traits because something's wrong with you. It's funny to me, not funny in a ha-ha way, funny in more of like a sad, frustrating way. But I think both sides have been kind of misrepresented, which is causing a lot of division and pointing the finger between the two. And we all have both energies within us. It's just some people are either going to lean more into their feminine or lean more into their masculinity. And obviously this isn't a talk on gender beliefs or anything like that, so we won't touch there. But yeah, we all have these energies within us. We should all aim to be balanced in both our logic and our heart. But the relationship dynamic, I think, has just been hijacked in a way that's creating a lot more chaos and division than is necessary.
I agree with that. And I think that was an incredible description of these things for people who have maybe not been or heard about these concepts. I think everyone's heard about them like tangentially, but not really like listened to someone speak and explain like what this means, and understanding that the way that I see it is this: like, toxic masculinity is like, bad behavior is bad behavior, whether it's from a man or a woman or from anyone. If you just behave like an asshole, like, you are an asshole. You're an asshole. You're not an asshole because you're a man or because you're a woman or because you're doing masculine or feminine things or whatever. You're just an asshole. And there's plenty of those out there, right? If you do things that are masculine or are feminine, that is just what you do. And then trying to force someone to be in a box that they're not supposed to be in. It's like me trying to be like, hey, I'm 5'6". I should be in the NBA and I should be listed as one of the tallest players. Like, well, no matter how hard I try, like it's not going to happen. So, anyways, I think that was a very good description. But not to get too far off track. And I love this conversation. I think we could go on this, but I'm not sure that.
Right.
I'm not sure that the podcast is in a place where we can go deep into this. But like, if you guys like this, like, please, because I would love to go do this, and this is why I purposely named the podcast not a fitness podcast. Anyways, we're talking about these aspects of duality, and where someone kind of leans into one side. The way that I see it a little bit is where people are either leaning into their strengths and neglecting their weaknesses. And it's like, hey, I'm really good at this thing. And if we can use the masculine feminine, I'm really good at like exuding my masculine energy, whether you're a male or a female. I'm really good at like being in the logic and being in this, but I don't actually pay attention to what my body needs. I don't take rest days. I don't know, I don't feel anything. I just like do what the coach says. I follow my macros. I follow my workout, and that's it. So at what point do you think, or what is a strategy maybe to sort of make those things a little bit more equal, and where it's like, hey, I need to realize that I'm either doing too much of one or too much or not enough of the other, or whatever the case is? What are some strategies that you have for that?
So there's a few things that I employ and utilize with my clients. Like, one is a SWOT analysis, where we actually look at and we develop, or we observe what are the strengths, the threats, the opportunities, and the weaknesses. So we kind of have those, but I also think that it's requiring that state of reflection and observance, and that's, one of the great reasons why we implement check-ins, right? To inspire that reflection and for them to really think back on their week, to even identify and we almost have to create that awareness for them. Like, hey, I may be lacking in this area. And then from there, I think the encouragement to lean into the discomfort is a conversation that almost continues the need to be had. Because a lot of us are uncomfortable with acknowledging that we may have an opportunity. And especially when we see what we're excelling really well in, it's very natural for us to just be like, I'm just going to focus on the good. I'm just going to focus on the good and ignore this opportunity. But I think as a coach, it's important for us to bring the bigger picture into scope and not only bring it to their awareness, but then have them feel it for themselves. We talk about autonomy and helping to foster that within our clients. So bringing it back to them and just asking them, like, if, say, hey, if you, for instance, know that you're really great at showing up for the workouts and pushing yourself and hitting all of your cardio sessions, but you're identifying that you're having a little bit of trouble with actually resting or honoring the body and taking a step back, how would that benefit you, or how would this affect you in the long run if you did or did not choose to improve upon that? And I think getting them to think through those consequences of, if I continue to neglect, what would that turn into? Would it turn into burnout? Would it turn into injury? Would it turn into, potentially disease from chronic stress? When we can start to help them see it and feel it for themselves, I think that brings this natural inspiration where they feel a little bit more courage to lean into those opportunities.
I really like the idea of kind of extrapolating it and making it a little bit extreme, just to sort of really get down to what's happening. Like an example that I use with clients all the time with just purely lifting is like, okay, you're doing that exercise that way, but what if you did it that way and you're doing it with 500 pounds? Like, what would happen? If your elbow's like a little bit out here, like 500 pounds on the bar, like your arm's going to snap off. Like that's just not going to work. Right. So if it's not going to work with 500 pounds, like don't do it with 50 pounds, right? It's just kind of the same principle. And I think that is kind of along the same lines of what you're saying is like, this is cool now, but what if you did this for 15 years like this? What ends up happening? And that's where like a coach like yourself who can kind of like zoom out and see the whole big picture of what's really going on here. Not just like, oh, your lifts increased this week, like thumbs up, pat on the butt and keep going. Like that's not enough. We've got to look at the big picture. And again, this is where I think a lot of things are missed with like the woo-woo stuff. It's like this is the big picture. These things do matter. They're just not always the biggest needle movers in themselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
The grounding, like you and I have talked about this before off this is like, we both love to walk outside in the grass and, do the red light in the sauna and all these things. But like, how much is that really moving the needle? Like physically?
Right.
Probably not a ton, but it still helps. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
And that's where this concept of like, what is evidence-based? What does that mean? If it helps me, isn't that evidence? And I think that's something that we have to lean into is like, do you feel like it's good? Then okay, then do it. Right.
Yeah. Yes. And like you said, I've loved the conversations that we've had about that, where it's almost this, we have to create our own, so there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I utilize that with my clients, but we also, from a client perspective, have to almost create that hierarchy of what's important to them in terms of what is not only producing external results, but also what is creating that inner harmony. Because to your point, if we're short on time and this person has a very specific or, time-bound goal, if we can only choose between one or the other, say grounding or hitting your gym session, well, what is your goal right now? Is it to slow down and find more peace? Okay, then choose grounding. But if your goal is to get stronger, or you have body composition goals, or you have all of this, then we know that the gym is what is going to take priority. So I think just, again, getting clear and, like you said, zooming out and seeing the bigger picture, is what ultimately helps them, learn how to navigate these things and make these decisions in the moment for themselves.
Sometimes we just really need to get out of our own way. I find like we're all brought up in a certain way, and we have beliefs and experiences and that make us the way we are. And sometimes it's really hard, and it's not our fault, but it's really hard to like see outside of that. And that's part of why like having a coach is so valuable, or just having friends, or an accountability system or network of some sort to be like, hey, you're actually doing this thing and that's like wrong or weird, or maybe try this instead. And you're like, oh my God, like that's so simple. Like, why didn't I think of that? And it's because your life didn't allow you to think of that, and that's okay, right? So given that, what are some of the resources or tools or things that you accessed or used to start to understand how to kind of work on the inner work stuff? Because it's not intuitive. It's not, and I don't know, maybe you did grow up in this world, but like most of us in the West, it's like we didn't like grow up having this stuff around. And so some people, grow up and then you find it somehow and you tap into some things. Like, what are the things that you actually use?
Oh my gosh. So because I 100% agree with you. I truly feel like I walked through my life unconscious for the first 30 years. Like I just followed the path that I thought was the path, and not really realizing that I wasn't choosing it for myself. It was just all compounded from life experiences and parents and all of that. But I think the first thing, and it's hilarious to me, was I was not happy. And who knows if that was hormones from being postpartum? Who knows if it was COVID and being stuck in the house? Who knows if it was like the wave of the, great awakenings? When you talk to all of these people, it's like something happened between 2019 and 2020. We don't really know what it was, but there was like this perfect storm for me. And I like laugh at myself for this because it's just showing it. I'm proud of it because it shows how much I've grown. But I was first like, how do you manifest? Like that was the first thing. Somehow I came across it. I don't know how, but I was like, I want to learn how to manifest because I need to manifest like a different life. And that kind of led me down that rabbit hole of what I believe is very new age, where it's like crystals and you just like sit and you light a candle and you like wish upon a star that a new life will drop into your lap. But I'm thankful for that initial interest, because then that led me down the path of meditating and then teaching me about the energy systems. And then that led me to finding an interest in yoga. And then that led me to yoga meditation school, which then taught me about trauma, because it was a trauma-informed school. So then that opened me up to really realizing how all of those life experiences from childhood, from my teenage years, from different relationships with people had really molded the way that I viewed myself in the world, and therefore the actions that I was taking and the path that I was walking. And that's what allowed me to start to really question, who am I without all of these things? So again, it's funny that I initially picked up this interest, which is so far disconnected from the reality that I believe the spiritual path or the inner work is. But it was almost needed, because it was like a billboard that caught my attention enough for me to start to dive in deeper.
It's probably super common though. And I don't think it's really that different with just purely fitness stuff. Like rarely is someone's first adventure into fitness going to be like, hey, I'm going to hire a coach who's like sensible and has like a normal workout program and like has a diet focused on whole foods and sleep and like and all the things, and ask me to meditate and like write down my whatever, all the stuff, all the good things that we know now. Like mostly like 90+% of the time it's going to be like, well, I saw this like jacked guy on Instagram and he said like to eat bull testicles. And so like, then I started it and I tried that and I was like, that's fucking weird, but I did it. And then I started like finding other stuff and I like learned a little bit better. So I think like it's silly when you think back on it, like, oh my God, what I know now is like so much greater than what I knew then.
Yes.
But it's something that I battle with in like the social media world of so much. It's like, there's so much like nonsense things, but if it's getting someone to like get into this world of fitness and health and transformation and all these things, and like I don't know if it's really like a bad thing. Someone's like promoting their like crystal thing, whatever, like sure they're making money on it off it and kind of sort of maybe scamming people a little bit here, but like if it gets them in the thing, like I don't know what do you think about that? I don't know what the answer is, but
yeah, I don't know either, and I'm in the same boat as you, specifically like when we're sharing either our personal experiences or sharing the work that we do in hopes that it reaches somebody and helps somebody and may invite them to work with us. Like this is something I really go back and forth on, where it's like, okay, I know that the reason why they may be struggling in their health right now is because of their, self-worth, or because of these stories, or because of just like all of the other things that they tried that didn't work, which then broke down their confidence and their ability to do it. And that's what I want to speak to, because that's what I know. And then I see like someone just be like, this is the workout plan that's going to fit. And I'm like, why are you saying that when you know what I know? But at the same time, I have to bring myself back to that realization. Like you said, they may not understand or see that they're lacking in self-worth, or that they're doing this. So how can we meet them where they are? And I struggle with that, because I'm like, am I not being authentic by like saying this other thing when I truly believe that it's this? But it is, I think that I think it comes down to intention, right? Like what our intentions are. Our intentions to just make a bunch of money and take from people, or is it to provide service and to help someone with the quality of their life? And number two, I think that it's then learning how to speak to that person in a way that connects with them and maybe does catch their interest and brings attention to what they perceive the problem is, versus what we may know with the knowledge and experience. We may be missing those people if we're just speaking to what we know, because they're not consciously aware of that problem right now. So I'm in the same boat. I don't know if there's an answer for it. I go back and forth, but I see both sides as well.
Part of it, I think, too, is you kind of you need different teachers and coaches and mentors at different stages. I remember when I was like, this is a while ago now, it's probably like 10 years ago, I went to this like online marketing like event thing. And it was like, now had I used some of the principles in there, like things would have been very different in my life. But at the time, they were talking about these like funnels and all. It was quite advanced, like for the time of the internet and the way whatever. But anyways, I'm reminiscing now. I'm remembering things from it. But there was like a lot of like these advanced things, and I didn't have a business, I had nothing. I was still in school. I was just like went to this thing, and it was so way past my level and my current like comprehension of what I wanted to do and why I was even there and all this stuff that I was like, these guys are fucking out to lunch. Like, who needs this? Like, why would you even do any of these things? I don't even have an idea. Never mind like all this fancy marketing stuff. And I think it's the same with fitness. And I think that I know that I'll speak for myself for sure that I fall into this where it's like, hey, maybe you're just giving a little bit too much here. It's like this person's not ready for this. I think this is for sure true, and maybe some of the turn off and why some of like the Eastern woo-woo side gets a little bit made fun of in some ways. It's like, hey, do you need all that stuff? Do you need a 17-step morning routine and to go and hug the trees and do all this stuff? Like maybe, but it's probably not the place you need to start. And so we got to really learn to meet people where they're at, but I think people also have to learn to meet themselves where they're at as well. Mm-hmm. And it's not about, you saw that person on Instagram deadlifting 750 pounds. Like that's not you. Like that's not you today, and it's probably you never. But you've got to really learn to like, hey, this is where I'm at. I just need to be one step ahead of me there. Yeah. So given that, what are some ways that you kind of like help people to set goals that are ambitious but not too far ahead of where they're at? Mm-hmm.
So I've posted this on my Instagram before, but I utilize this diagram, this graphic of like our comfort zone in growth, right? So we have to get a little outside of our comfort zone in order to stretch us, but not so far out that it's unrealistic or we just immediately jump to self-sabotage because it's just so far away. We perceive it as so far away. So I utilize that graphic when we're creating goals, and I create goals in the beginning with my clients during the first month, and then we tend to circle back on them quarterly. But we reflect and we establish where they are now, and as well as their long-term vision for their goals. Because I like them to think big. I want them to think big, but then we start to break that down into short-term goals that are steps along the way. So we'll create a focus for the next 3 months or the next 6 months, whether that's strength or performance, body composition. Sometimes, like I have some clients that are really right now just focused on moving their body, nourishing their body, and now they're really focusing on like the healing. So it just, again, depends on the individual, but we create this big vision. We break it down into action steps that are more short term. So 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And then we break that down even further to what is realistic based on their schedule, based on the time that they have available, and based on what they are feeling interested to lean into, as well as addressing that little blind spot that I may pick up for them. And from there, we create like a monthly goal. So a monthly goal, month 1, month 2, month 3. And then we can kind of break that down into benchmarks to shoot for each week, which then gets brought up into the check-ins and the one-on-one calls that we have. So again, I think it's just like getting them to dream really big, then bringing that realistically into how do we get there? What are we going to accomplish this year? Then what are we going to accomplish in 3 months that helps us to step into that big year goal? And then looking at what is realistic based on the schedule and the just life experiences, life circumstances that they are navigating through right now.
You said something in there that I really want to talk about, and it's when people don't have a goal of body composition change or strength performance, whatever. Like maintenance is a goal, and I think it's kind of the place like physically that we all are striving towards. Like at some point, you lose weight, and then you don't want to lose weight for forever. You'll disappear, or you want to like add muscle, but you're not going to just add muscle like endlessly for forever. And so like at some point, like maintenance is the goal, but it's really hard, and people are sometimes like not okay with like, hey, I just actually want to stay the same. Is that like, am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to just like to do this? But it's also difficult because you're not aiming at anything. So in that, like with this client that you're talking about, you don't have to give any, obviously identifying details or anything, but how are you going about keeping this person kind of on track? I'm like, hey, we're not trying to like increase your deadlift, your squat, or your whatever. We just want to like kind of keep things status quo and like keep doing things. Like, how do you goal set for that?
So what I use for her is we're mainly talking on our check-ins about her perceived quality of life. So we're bringing up like the time that she has actually spent reflecting or journaling, or we're looking, of course, at like the biofeedback, right? So digestion, mood, energy, all of this. But I've shared with her, and I've shared this with many clients, like my big revelation with maintenance came about through working with my own coach. So I've worked with Ram, y'all know, 4 weeks at the beach. Shout out. But I've worked with him since 2021. And at that point, I had already experienced working with a macro coach, which was a completely different experience with that person. But had a good grasp, like had already been certified in personal training, had already worked with clients one-on-one, both in person and online, and small group in person as well. So I had a pretty good knowledge within the gym, and macros, but I was still under that guise of I'm either going to be bulking or cutting. It was bulking, cutting. I'm going to bulk for 6 to 9 months and I'm going to cut for 3, and I'm just going to repeat the cycle. I never allowed myself the space to live in maintenance, and he's who encouraged me to do so. And I noticed how much better I started to feel, not only just because I wasn't constantly in this state of trying to physically change my body, but because it taught me how to live without chaos. Because I think we create this thing when we're in a surplus or when we're in a cut where it's like that in and of itself is what motivates us into action. But it's really like, how can we live in this state of peace with ourselves and maintain it? That is extremely hard for us to do. I believe, especially for Americans, like we just constantly need this carrot. But then that carrot becomes, how can you actually like establish this as your baseline? So I've shared that with her, and it just comes back to focusing on these things that do not have to do with our body. Like, of course, we are, again, making sure that digestion, energy, stress levels, hunger, and all of that are supported. But it allows that person to really immerse themselves into, this is the way that I'll be living for the rest of my life. And it teaches them not to self-sabotage, which I think a lot of us can fall into as well.
It's often about changing the carrot, I think, as well.
Yes.
It's like, you don't have to always be physically changing something, but when we don't set goals properly or know what we're actually going after, it's really hard to like make a plan to get there. It's like people say, I want to just like make more money. I'm like, well, how are you going to do that? You can't just sit there and wish that you're going to. Are you going to try and get a raise at your job? Are you going to start a company and sell something? Are you like, what are you actually going to do to do that? Like just wishing for, I want to be at maintenance. You have to chase something. So changing the carrot and identifying other ways to make progress that is not increasing or decreasing weight or increasing muscle mass or decreasing body fat or whatever. Like there's way more other things that you can chase, and often they're a lot cooler than that as well. But you were you were a coach already, and you still reached out to hire a coach. Now, in this audience, I think it's like 60-40 male to female-ish. And I get this from a lot of guys who are like, nah, like I know what I'm doing. I just like, I just answered this like one question for me. And then my snarky response, and if they're like close to me, I'll say this to them, but it's like, if you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't have this question. But anyways, where does the ego come in to say like, hey, I know what I'm doing, but I also like need some help? And how do you reconcile that for yourself? If that was like a thing that came up for you at all?
Oh, yeah, it was. And I used to be I admit I used to be a very ego-driven person, especially back in like my career when I was in retail management. I was very much in my ego and chasing accolades and all of this stuff, trying to prove myself. But I think I was at a place in my life where, again, I had the knowledge that would get me maybe where I wanted to go, probably in a little bit of a longer time frame, because I knew that there were people that existed out there that were more experienced and more nuanced. But I also I recognized that regardless of, even if he had the same knowledge base, I knew that I needed somebody from an accountability and support standpoint. I knew from working with other people that accountability piece was vital. And I didn't have that in my life at all. Like I didn't have a friend to lean on at that point. I didn't have it. And so I knew that was something that was really missing, because if it wasn't, I would have been doing the things. So I had to just get real with myself and admit, okay, I know what to be doing, yet I'm not doing it. I need somebody there to help kind of get me in line and to, again, maybe point out some of these things that I'm missing within myself that is making this a more difficult process than it needs to be. So I reached out. I raised my hand.
Structure and accountability is definitely the name of the game.
Yes.
In today's age, there is no shortage of information. All of the like, well, how do I do this? Or what is the definition of this? Like, it's all out there. You can get any answer to any fitness question like very quickly. And the thing that I also say is like the people who are putting that information out there are the people who are also actively looking for clients. Like we're putting out free fitness information, like not holding any secrets back or like whatever. It's, hey, here are the things. Like you can go do them on your own. If you wanted to scroll through Instagram and just like go do it, you could definitely do it. Right. That's not really the reason to hire a coach, other than maybe sifting through some of the nonsense, and it'll save you time for sure. And I think in the long run, money, but it's definitely not an easy thing to say to put your hand up and reach out. Like, hey, like I need help with this. That's okay. That doesn't make you broken or lesser than or whatever, which is for sure a problem with a lot of men. I
agree. And I mean, yes, I see it back to like the feminine masculine. I see a lot of women who are very much in their hyper masculine, who are like, I need to like climb to the top and be a boss babe and all of this. So it's hard for them as well to express that they need help. But I do see it probably more apparent in men. But I think, and hopefully if someone's listening to this and is struggling with that, to me, it is not only is it not just, because again, I think almost it's like this sign of weakness, perceived weakness, but to me it is incredibly intelligent. Mm-hmm. Because even if you believe that you know the things that a coach may know, you're outsourcing it to allow your energy to be focused on something else. And I think that's the other huge benefit of working with a coach is like, for me, I don't have to even think about my own stuff. I can just like send it to him, and then he can help me develop a plan so that I can then focus on what I really love doing, which is working with other people. And then I'm obviously picking up little things along the way that he may do differently. But that, I think the biggest part is like the fact that I can outsource that for myself, which then opens up my time and energy to focus on the things that I really love focusing on. It's the same thing as like I work at home, right? I have a home office, and I can write off somebody coming to clean my house. I don't really enjoy cleaning my house that much, and it takes me like 4 to 6 hours. So yeah, I could clean it myself, but why would I when I can just hire somebody else and help them in a way, right? But then it frees up my time to do things that are more impactful. So I think hiring help and outsourcing that it's a sign of intelligence, and it's a sign of strength, because you're just being very strategic over what you're spending your energy on.
you bring up a very good point, and I think it's that you will pay for everything and not always with money. Like by you cleaning your house, you're saving whatever the money is that you pay the cleaner, but you spend 4 to 6 hours of your time, and that has some monetary value, and we can debate about what that is, but you're paying with your time and you're paying with your energy, and that is extremely valuable. So I think this is another thing that is often misunderstood. Like, sure, is coaching expensive? Like maybe, but also everything is expensive. And so that coupled with, well, how expensive is it for you to keep spinning your wheels, keep going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, never changing, always being upset with the way you look and feel and perform and show up in your life? What is the monetary cost of that? Is that worth a couple $100 a month to you? Maybe, and maybe not. And if you're okay feeling like that, then cool. But, everyone's allowed to do whatever they want. But everything will have a cost, and we have to also consider like the non-financial costs to these things.
Yeah, 100%. Time and energy are our most valuable time spends. So I agree with you.
Lauren, can you teach me something? I was looking at the moon last night, and my brother said this. And my brother, and we're getting to the end, so we get to talk about not fitness stuff anymore. We were driving home, and my brother's like, the modern world, and my brother's like, no one knows him on the podcast, but he's like super analytical, like not very emotional at all, like software engineer, just like what, numbers and whatever. And he's like, not enough people in the world like give enough credit to the moon. I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And it was like a full moon. It was like kind of red, kind of low in the thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I have a really direct question, but what can you teach me something or teach us something about the full moon, the cycles, how we can kind of like relate anything of this in our life? And it doesn't have to be fitness related at all. Teach me something about the moon.
I can teach you quite a few things about the moon. I think number one is just recognizing that obviously there's all these theories and stuff about the moon and what the moon actually is and how far it truly is from Earth, and everyone's entitled to feel how they feel about that. But regardless of it, it's proven that it has an effect on Earth, right? Because it's what controls the tides. And it is, you can even look at studies and see that on full moons, or even different parts of the lunar cycle, human behavior, now this, we could argue if it's correlation versus causation, but there's more accidents. There's more like freak accident things. So like more car accidents, more like domestic violence things, and just kind of more out of the ordinary incidents. When you look at the human body, we're 75 to 78% water. So, and I think there's like an entire universe, Earth, in us. If we look at our lungs, they look very similar to the root systems of trees. Our eyes look like space and the auras and auroras out there. So there's all these different things that connect us to this Earth, and we are nature in and of itself. So just like the moon influences the tides, the moon influences us as well. And while I don't think we should like worship it at all, we can use it as a tool of self-reflection, since we are influenced by it. So, and the full moons are typically a great time to look within and see what could possibly need releasing. And new moons are really great to reflect on what we'd like to bring into our life. So we're living within this cycle of this reflection and thinking about what is aligned versus what is not aligned. And then of course you can get in a deeper level and compare it to like what zodiac it's in. So for right now, today is a full moon in Sagittarius. So that's encouraging someone to reflect about what is potentially standing in the way of someone being in their truth, as well as reflecting upon what societal programming or what cultural programming may be existing that is clouding our vision from standing in our truth. And it's an invitation to release it. So for anybody who is interested in kind of following the lunar cycles, there's different layers to this, but I think the simplest way is to just be mindful. Like, number one, appreciate the beauty of it, because it's a beautiful thing, and it just gives us a reason to pause and to breathe and to get outside of our head and just like look at the beauty of Earth. But also that reminder that life does come in cycles, and this kind of invitation to look within, to see what needs releasing. And with that release, you're then creating the space to then call something in with the new moon. So it's a little bit.
I think it's a complete shame that more people don't know these things, and we're not taught this as part of like our normal, just like cultural education. Because like everything in the world is based off of this. There's a reason why there's the months the way they are, and different cultures use different calendars, and all of them follow the moon. And there's a reason why like all the religions have holidays on the same times of the year. Like it's not just all a big coincidence. And even if we think about it very scientifically, like you're saying, our body is made out of so much water. The moon has an impact on the ocean. Like you don't think it has an impact on like the few drops of water that are inside your body. Like it seems almost silly to not believe that once you know that information. I'm not sure exactly how practical it all is, and I think it's just because we don't understand enough of it. Rather, not that it's not practical or not there's something I just don't know what the answer is. And like, well, how do I, knowing that information, like how does that help me? The knowing that there is like more accidents and more stuff that happens and more weird shit, like. Great. I'm not sure how to use that information.
Yeah. I think, again, I think sometimes we can get lost in the sauce, especially in the woo-woo world, right? But I think the practicality is just, number one, it just helps us to bring more mindfulness to our life. And I think it's important. I think oftentimes we constantly search for something outside of ourselves. Like I shared within my journey that, anything from intermittent fasting, Beachbody workouts to crystals and manifestation, we're just constantly almost like brainwashed into thinking that the answers lie outside of us. When really, if we can at least understand the premise of, say, the moon and how it does affect Earth and the oceans and ourselves, then it's just like that reminder, okay, I can look within. So even if it's 2 times per month, like let's just keep it super simple. 2 times per month on a full moon and on a new moon. You're pausing for a second, you're breathing into your body, and you're reflecting on what it's asking of you or what comes up that needs to be released. What vision do you see yourself wanting to bring into your life? You could do it twice a month and that's it. It could be that simple. I don't think everyone is in a place or wants to be in a place where they're like researching like, okay, Sagittarius is on Chiron and there's a Kazemi. Like we don't need to do all of that. We really don't have to make it complicated. But I think everyone could potentially utilize it to the level in which they feel called to. And it can be that simple as just calling awareness to what's happening within a couple times a month.
As you were saying that, I was just thinking that if you're the type of person who's listening to someone talking about crystals and whatever, you're like, oh, those fucking weirdo people, how could that be true? But you're also believing in like intermittent fasting, this cortisol spikes, that glucose. I got news for you. Like you are on the same wavelength there, and both of them are wrong. Like you got to reconcile that a little bit. Like there is a reality. Reality does exist, and we can't change that. Like things are the way they are. And you can choose to believe anything within that. But just because it's the people that you like to follow believe in it, it doesn't make it right.
Right. I 100% agree. Yes. 100% agree.
Lauren, this has been super good. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get into today?
No, other than I always like to remind everyone, just like we discussed, that it's very easy for us to look outwards for answers, but I try to remind people every chance that I get that all of the answers lie within ourselves, and you're much more capable and powerful than you could ever imagine. So whatever you see for yourself that you may think is unrealistic, I just encourage you to go for it. You'll find your way, but have the courage to take the chance on yourself because you hold all of the tools that you need. Amazing message. What updates, if any, do you have for us on your upcoming podcast? Today is May 23rd. Yes. So I'm not sure when you guys are planning on launching, but maybe it'll be after this episode is already out, but let us know. Yeah. So we are officially starting to record next weekend. So we start recording on June 1st, and we're recording some episodes, making sure that we have some in the tank before launching, and we plan to launch mid-July. So very excited to get that out. And I think it's going to be a great asset to the podcast world. And get ready, because Carmi and Lauren are a whole vibe, but we're going to be bringing on some awesome people as well. And I'm excited for it.
Amazing. I'm super excited for it too, because I think you guys together will be a really good duo. And just giving your guys' own experiences and the way that you relate to people, like it will be a refreshing thing. There's not another podcast. I mean, there's millions of podcasts out there, and a lot of us kind of end up saying the same stuff. But I don't think that there's any, not that I know of any, that are quite like what you guys will bring to the table. And everything is all about like our own experiences and how we kind of relate to people. So I'm excited to hear it too. I'm really excited for you guys.
Thank you.
Where can people reach you? In the meantime, I'll put it on the show notes, but what's your contact info?
Best way to reach me is on Instagram. So I'm at Lauren with 2 N's .ElizabethX. And yeah, send me a DM, get into conversation. We can talk about the moon. We can talk about fitness, nutrition, anything that floats your boat.
And it's all the same thing in the end anyways, but I'll put your IG in the show notes. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. Any last message you want to leave the people with here in closing?
No, thank you so much for having me on. This was a blast.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Give Lauren a follow, be updated for her upcoming podcast. That's it. Go look at the moon, go outside, be a good person. See you next time.